I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to be bringing you an hour of high-quality radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family, and the birds and the fish and the little furry critters running around that the birds eat and that eat some birds, and basically everyone and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together on this tiny little dot in the universe called Earth. And we have, as usual, a wonderfully high-quality show for you today. We're going to chat just for the next 10 minutes or so, and feel free to call in at any time here at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And yeah, I picked this station in this format because I would like to talk to people. So give us a call. And then we're going to hear a pre-recorded interview with a fellow named Staten Middleton, who has rewilded 24 acres of farm into wetland. And it's a kind of a nice story there. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful. And then, Rebecca, it'll be your turn at the mic. And what will you be talking about?
Tree of Heaven. We're talking about Tree of Heaven.
Ah, Tree of Heaven. Or is it Tree of Heavens or Trees of Heaven? I don't know. But all right, looking forward to that. And then it's ecological news from around the world. And as I said, hopefully at some point we'll hear from you at 877-909-1007. So this past week was the Governor's Fish Day, and that I went to, and we've talked about this before. It's the day where they try to take journalists out onto fishing trips with, embedded with government officials. And I went this year because they've been offering, the past couple of years, they've been offering a non-fishing alternative. So I went and I got to explore Kelly's Island State Park with the director of the park, a cool guy called Chris Ashley. And that it was very nice, as always. And actually next week's interview are going to be the recordings I made at that event. In fact, there was a little press conference thing at the very end that I actually got to ask the governor an eco question, which was a surprise that I haven't done that before. So it was very nice. We really had a good time walking around there in the park, learning about the glacial grooves and so forth. And, if you haven't gotten out there yet, hop on the ferry. It's a nice little day trip to go check out Kelly's Island. I wanted to talk a little bit about, next week I'm going to talk about the event itself, but this week I wanted to talk about what happened with my discussions with my fellow environmental journalists that I was on this little trip with, and there were two fellows and specifically that I talked with for quite a bit, and they they were sort of like perfect representations on the problems people have, on the incorrect look at environmental issues that people have right now. So one of them was in complete despair. All right, this was a reporter for a large paper. I'm not going to name the paper or the reporter, but essentially he was feeling that news stories, that coverage of environmental issues has not done anything over the last 20, 30 years, that all this information we're putting out is completely useless because it hasn't changed policies. And like a lot of people, he tied the lack of progress to our economic system, which trumps everything. And so he's in despair that things are ever going to change. And that is really a not very useful point of view to come from, in my opinion. He also expressed the idea that technology is not going to get us out of our environmental problems. This is a wrong-headed thinking, I think, that a lot of people have, that it's too late, that there's nothing we could do about it. And every time you actually do something, you have an effect. So every time we switch to an electric car, every solar panel we put up, every time we insulate our house, we improve things, and the question is, are we doing it fast enough? And the answer is no, not yet, although the switch to a sustainable economy has been accelerating all over the world, especially in other parts of the world. But having that despair point of view that there's nothing we could do, it's too late, why even try? See, because that's the conclusion to the despair point of view, that we don't even need to try because there's nothing we could do about it. And that defeatist attitude, that is the surest way to to take the whole country, to take the whole world into complete environmental disaster and meltdown. And I also this fellow was old enough, he should remember, back in the 70s, there was a pre-environmental movement country. There was a time before we had things like regulations on what companies could dump into the waterways and regulations about what companies could put into the air. And that's when we had rivers that caught fire. We had people dying of mercury poisoning. Things used to be much worse, and it was still within our economic system that we improved all these things. So it's not like we have to overturn the whole economic system in order to improve the environment. We just have to improve the environment. We just have to pass laws and elect politicians that are willing to improve the environment. But that brings me to the other environmental reporter that I was talking to on this trip. And he was sort of the perfect representation of the denial of environmentalism. The guy, this fellow, was like, he's also old enough, and he was like, oh, I remember when I was at school back in the 70s, everybody was talking about the glaciers, that we'd be well into the next ice age by now. And
well, science has marched on and discovered new things since then, buddy.
Yeah, things, right. Information did not stop coming into the scientific community when you graduated school. We're learning new things. And it is true that back in the 70s, they were looking at the fact that if you just look at the historical patterns and what are called the Milechovic cycles, in other words, the changes in the Earth's climate that are dictated by the Earth's orbit, if you just look at that, historically speaking, we're overdue for an ice age. But for the past 200 years, we've been dumping excess CO2 and methane into the atmosphere, and those have overwhelmed the natural cycles that are caused just by things like the Earth's orbit. So yes, we are overdue for an ice age, but we've put so much carbon in the air that it has actually overwhelmed that orbital effect. And in fact, I have read papers, and I saw a big presentation by a scientist at Bowling Green State University a few years ago, and she basically, through her research, said, yes, we should be on our way to an ice age, but we've put so much carbon in the air, we have avoided it. And the problem, so we might, once we stop putting excess carbon in, we might not want to go all the way back to the pre-industrial levels of carbon. We might want to keep a little bit extra just to keep heading off an ice age. But it's very clear that we're putting in way too much. We are killing the planet.
We broke the refrigerator.
Yeah, it's kind of like we put an electric heater in the fridge, and all the food is getting spoiled. Yep. So we've overdone. So what he learned back in school, what in the 70s or whatever, he went to college. I think he was the early 70s, late 60s. That is true scientifically. We are overdue for an ice age, but new information, new learning has shown us that we have wiped out that effect because we've put so much greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. It's pretty straightforward. But so I had one fellow reporter who was in despair. This fella, I would say, was in denial because his whole position was, well, we were wrong back then. Maybe we must be wrong this time too. Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
And unfortunately, both of them had the third problem with environmental reporting right now, and that is ignorance, in that neither of them had heard about our big story last week and the week before. We covered it too, about the whole controversy at the EPA, where 600 EPA people sent a letter to Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, basically saying, stop lying about the environment. You're hurting our agency and you're hurting scientific truth. Even though these are environmental reporters, and this should have been in their knowledge, they did not even know that this letter had been written or that Lee Zeldin had put on administrative leave, essentially fired about a third of the people that had signed this letter. So all I'm saying is you're very lucky that you're listening to this show because you're getting information that other reporters won't give you, and you're getting information from a point of view of we can still fix this. That's why the show is called For a Green Future, because I do firmly believe that we can still have a green future if we just change our habits. And increasingly, changing our habits is becoming more and more the responsibility of individuals as opposed to the governments, because frankly, people have taken over the government that are trying to take us in the exact wrong direction, that are denying reality. And so that's why I also find hope, not just in the fact that all the other countries of the world have accepted the reality of climate change and are actually working to save the planet, but I also find hope in the stories about individuals that have done things to help the planet. And that's why I asked for this interview with Staten Middleton. He has taken 25 acres of farmland and using a government program. Okay, so to give the governor credit, he did use funding from the H2O program. He has changed it in just a couple years from essentially biologically dead farmland into this lush, really productive wetland. It took almost no time at all. I have to apologize a little for the quality of this. We did the interview sitting next to a pond on his property that has a fountain on it, and I did a lot of tricky studio stuff and got rid of most of the background fountain noise, but it's not perfect. But I think you'll still enjoy the interview.
All right. Well, hello, and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and what you got going here?
Sure, yeah. My name is Staten Middleton, and I've owned this property for the last 3 or 4 years since my father passed away. And my father owned it for probably 15 years, and then his father before him, my grandfather, owned it since the mid-60s. And what we've done here is taken from a pasture land and farm, regular conventional farming, back to its more native state, which is a native prairie and wetland, and specifically an H2 Ohio site. And this area we're presently in right now is just kind of not part of the H2 Ohio program, but it's something that I wanted to personally do to improve my corner of the world, and put in something more native and sustainable for wildlife.
All right, cool. And we just finished a little tour of the whole property, and I must say it's amazing to think that this was farmland just a few years ago. It really looks, beautiful and wild. It's fairly carefully tended, and I guess you're doing the bulk of the tending, right?
Yeah, my name's Nick Breen. I'm the owner and operator of Custom Garden Solutions. I do everything from traditional gardening to gardening and landscaping with native plants to restoration, as we can see all around us. I've been working here since he was trying to pick seed mixes.
Yeah. Yeah, Nick's been instrumental in picking the seed mixes, putting down the seed mixes, getting rid of invasives.
Yeah, woodland restoration is probably my strongest skill. So all the woody invasives, there's still something here. There always will be something here. It's an ongoing process, but all of the woodland has been gone through at least once. All of the original adult invasive bushes have been removed. New woody plants and herbaceous plants have been planted. And honestly, this project goes way head and shoulders above what H2 Ohio could ever ask for, because H2 Ohio doesn't really care what you plant as long as it covers the earth.
Yeah.
This is all high quality seed mixes, carefully picked, carefully maintained. Basically, it's honestly the highest quality restoration that I've really seen around here. Again, I mean, I know I'm being a bit egotistical about this, but just the amount of plants here and the variety of different habitats we've already been able to create in like 3 years is pretty cool.
Yeah, I would not have guessed 3 years looking at this. I would have guessed, 10 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had a variety of animals, plants and animals sort of coming back. What sort of critters have you been seeing since you started this project?
Well, I remember, when I first came out here after my father died and I acquired it, and I came out and, right near where we're standing was a burn pile with garbage and, and this barnyard grass, and didn't really sustain anything, and it's kind of it wasn't really taken advantage of. It wasn't really at its highest and best use. So when I came out, I kind of noted that I didn't hear any birds. I hardly ever heard or saw any birds. But now I come out and they're all over the place. I use my phone app to listen to birds, and the ones I can't see it's amazing. You can hear them now.
Yeah, I saw quite a flock of red-winged blackbirds there. What's the most exotic critter that you've come across here?
Yeah, the one weirdly it comes with I didn't name the bird, but it's called
Isn't it Dick Sizzle?
Dick Sissel.
Sissel.
Dick Sissel.
Okay.
D-I-C-K Sissel. And it's a really striking yellow-headed bird with a kind of a white or yellow apron, I guess, or whatever. I'm not quite sure, but I took a picture of it, and some friends of mine identified it as a Dick Sissel.
Wow.
And he said that there are only one other pair in Wood County, and it's in Winter Park. So it's a kind of a rare bird. So that's the rarest one. We've seen bald eagles and owls and harriers. I think it's one of my favorite. I love watching harriers because they have amazing flight patterns. Or you can see why they named it a Harrier jump jet after a Harrier. They're just beautiful to watch.
I would say that like the plants here are worth talking about in a rarity sense as well. Like not the ones that I planted per se, but some of the stuff that I got to walk in and see. The remnant woodland here is incredible. It has things like trillium, wild geranium, Sullivan seal, Pennsylvania sedge, gray dogwood, good crop of hickories. It's a beautiful alive remnant. It's something that I'm incredibly lucky to be able to work in.
That's a remnant.
Remnant is a mature woodland what has never been completely clear cut.
Okay.
As in, it's an existing what's the word? Not perpetual, but a continuing woodland in a sense. As we were talking about this when we were walking around the property, but woodland are always going to recycle. People will be under the misconception that the woods will appear. It will succeed out of a prairie and become second growth where all the trees are the same height because they all germinated about the same time. And eventually those second growth trees will start to die and large canopy trees will take over and then you have a mature woodland. That is true, however, that's not the end of the story. As woods ages, canopy trees die out here and there, allowing for pockets of new second growth, and it's a cycle, and it's a gradient, it's variety, it never ends. And that's what I got to see when I came in here. I got to see all sorts of plants what we would have otherwise had to spend thousands of dollars to buy. Already here, already doing their thing.
Nice.
Yeah, this native seed mix. I mean, the native seed mix is nice, but it's pricey.
That's why places like Winter Garden and other natural parks cannot restore quickly. It's just seeds are expensive.
It's prohibitive.
So you mentioned H2 Ohio. How exactly did that program help you create this?
Well, I kind of, I'm a lawyer, and I'm kind of familiar with those USDA Department of Agriculture programs for the FSA Farm Service Agency here in Ohio, Wood County. And I went out and talked to them about various CRP conservation reserve programs. And one of them is one where they want to clean up the Great Lakes. So weirdly, and kind of ironically, they call it the kidney for the Great Lakes. So, and having just had a kidney transplant, I can fully understand this. So it cleans up, it slows the erosion from running water. It slows down the actual runoff to a slower stream, so it's not go to the silt, so you're not carrying away topsoil. And then you're also, if the farmers put glyphosate or 2,4-D or whatever on their field, it's less likely to go immediately into the ditch, which goes immediately into Lake Erie, which becomes an algae bloom. So that's the H2 Ohio.
So was this is it just advice or is it actual financial help?
Yeah, it's financial. They I took like I said, the farm, for me to continue to farm it, I would have had to put a significant investment of tile, which would have been probably $40,000-$50,000, in farming it, and it just wants to be a wetland. So, they're offering this program, and they pay, I forget the rent, but you can't really make money at it. You'd make more money farming it.
It's essentially to cover the worst of the cost of doing the soil work to make a functioning wetland system.
Yeah, it's to cover the cost of putting it in, basically. And then you get a minor reduction on your taxes from CA certified ag use to conservation use. A little bit of a discount. And then they give you a signing bonus, which basically pays for the other half of your construction costs. So you don't have any out-of-pocket costs. So it's kind of very much win-win, if you're conservation minded. If you're driven by money, you'd plow it down and farm it. But that's not what I want to do.
Gotcha. And you've got, what is it, about 20 6 acres here, 25, 6 acres.
There's about 23
Yeah.
restored acres,
23
about
restored.
23 seeded acres, which means it's probably closer to 24 restored acres. A lot of the areas have been seeded, even the woodlands have been seeded. We have a great population of wildflowers and forbs underneath the trees, too.
Yeah, and they didn't reimburse for this, unfortunately. It'd be nice, but it's not about reimbursement. My goal is to make leave the world better than I found it.
And that's a lot of conversations that we had because H2 Ohio is a great program, but it has a definite end. And what we wanted to do was high quality restoration, and that's not something that H2 Ohio will allow you to do. They will only allow you to do the most basic of restoration after you've installed such a wetland system. At least they will only pay for. They will only pay for the most basic of restoration after these types of systems are installed.
But if you want like air conditioning and a sunroof, and if you want all the really cool add-ons like the really nice flowers and things like that for benefiting wildlife, it's got to come from your own pocket, which I'm more than happy to do. I used to backpack, and part of our mantra or whatever was leave the trail better than you found it. So you always carry out more than you're just responsible for yourself. My dad taught me that in law firm. Just be responsible for yourself. That's.
And so you were telling me a little bit, you had an experience that sort of triggered this whole decision. You were kayaking.
Yeah, I love to sea kayak. And years ago I went to South Bass Island, Putin Bay, and kayaked around Putin Bay, or South Bass Island. And it was a beautiful day, but it was a hot day, and it was a full-on algae bloom. And there were parts of the water that you couldn't put a paddle. Like you had to force your paddle to get in the water because of the algae. And motorboats would go by, on a full plane going by 25 miles an hour, and their wake, there would be no white froth. There's no white. It was just like in a chocolate milk, and it was disgusting. And I came back, kind of banked that information, and I always had a background of wanting to conservation oriented, I guess. And then the Toledo water crisis happened, and I saw a movie called Toxic Puzzle that was played at the Peristyle, kind of dealing with the water crisis in Toledo and the Baltic Ocean, Baltic Sea, Bay of Biscay, Biscayne Bay, that is, and all around the world. And that kind of awakened me to, well, maybe I can do something locally. And that kind of was the germination or the seed for wanting to do this.
All right. Well, that's about all we have time for. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I'm just really glad for the opportunity to work on this project, to be honest. Like I said, I went to school at BGSU for environmental policy, and at the time I was working at Winter Garden and Simpson Park. I learned most everything I know about restoration from my wonderful boss, Cinda Stutzman. A great person. Helped us out on this project immensely.
Yeah.
Still does. Still pick her brain. She's been in restoration for 20-some years. Responsible for basically most of the good stuff about Winter Garden Park. But yeah, that's that I'm a gardener at heart. I love doing restoration, and just glad I get to be a part of this, and I'm glad I got to work under people like Cindy. And honestly, it's freeing to be able to work in a project like this, because it's really just you and me. Like, we can, within reason, as long as we're making a net benefit, we can just sort of bounce ideas off each other and go for it.
Yeah, that's all about how we can make it better. Yeah. Nick's doing a great job. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, sorry, apologize for the sound quality, but that's what happens when you go outside sometimes. So what did you think? 877-909-1007. If you were to somehow come into like 20 acres of farmland would you consider rewilding it, or would you just sort of say, get some corn and soybeans in there and let's get some money out of there? What do you think? 877-909-1007. So now it's time to hear from our patrons and sponsors. For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or you can call directly at 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And I just want to supplement that with a little bit of a personal testimonial here. Yesterday, I actually spent the morning and first part of the afternoon out at Three Meadows Park there because the Wood County Park District offered a kayaking lesson. And so I was actually out there with a bunch of other people learning to kayak. I've done it once before, but I actually didn't know what I was doing. Now I have some idea of how you're actually supposed to do it. And it was a really fun, intense thing. At the end of it, I was kind of surprised. I didn't expect this. They taught us how to do kayak rescues, which means that we all had to jump in the water and swamp our kayaks and then figure out how to unswamp them and, get back in them out while still out on the water. It was great fun, really a good experience, and just the sort of thing that the Wood County Park District does all the time. So our program is also brought to you by our patrons, and these are wonderful, foresighted people who have not despaired and are not in denial, but understand that we need to do something to help the future, to help bring us to a green future. And they've done that by going to For a Green Future on patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they looked at the different membership levels, picked a level that matched their budget, and every week a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and that's how we can afford to bring you this amazing show, including Rebecca's cool little contribution every week. And what will we be talking about this week, Rebecca?
I'm doing a segment I call Tree of Heaven, most egregious misnomer ever.
Okay. All right, let's hear it.
Before I start, I would like to point out that I may be a little off my game. I apologize because someone in a senseless and sickening act has unplugged the soda machine.
Oh, I know you were looking for some of that
so
sweet,
I don't
sweet
have a
caffeine
drink.
there.
I'm
I'm
very
sorry.
sad.
Yeah.
Please respect my privacy during this difficult time. Anyway, I wanted to talk about something called Tree of Heaven, or sometimes Tree of the Gods, or the Silk Tree. I don't know why it's called the Silk Tree. I looked it up, and its fibers can be used to make paper. But it's. I don't think silkworms grow on it. That's mulberry trees, right?
Right.
Yeah. So why is it a silk tree? Were they making clothes out of it before they discovered how to make silk or something? Asian prehistory? I don't know. I wish I could figure that one out. Anyway, it is a fast-growing, weak-wooded, deciduous tree from China, from the area roughly from China to Australia, meaning a lot of little tiny islands with a lot of different stuff going on. It was introduced in the U.S. in the Philly region originally in 1784. It has a high tolerance of poor soils and air quality, so it tolerates pollution really, really well. It was brought to the West Coast by immigrants in the 1850s. I think from the other direction, interestingly, and flourishes in disturbed sites. So if somebody done peeled off all the vegetation, it's one of the first things that will come back and help reclaim it. That's one of its better points. But yeah, so it also can clone itself via root sprouting or suckering, making it difficult to kill. And it's known for its copious seed production and can grow 49 feet in 25 years. So you can have you a tree of heaven real fast. They get between 80 to 100 feet high, and they have some ecological negatives, but mostly that they are invasive as all get out. They are. They're allelopathic, which I had not heard of, but it turns out that means it releases chemicals which either repress or stimulate the growth of other plants. In this case, repress. And here's the thing, spotted lanternflies love it, which are invasive and very destructive. So, yeah, we need to get those out of any places that, preferably that are not China or the islands between China and Australia. Some of the benefits, which mostly what I heard in this area constituted damning with faint praise, what you might call. They can be used to trap spotted lanternflies. Basically, if you got a tree of heaven that has no spotted lanternflies on it, you don't have spotted lanternflies anywhere near there. So, but you might get them eventually. They can hop from tree of heaven to tree of heaven. They do provide shade. They're useful for fiber and food, and they're good for soil stabilization. That root system will keep the soil in place. Everyone agrees that the negatives just outweigh the positives by tons, by metric tons. Some threats to that plant, to the tree of heaven plant, would include the spotted lanternfly, which tends to suck out all its sap. It can also get fungal diseases in soggy soils. And this is originally going to be our zinger fact, was that it's used in Korean and Chinese traditional medicine to treat diarrhea, asthma, epilepsy, menstrual pain, malaria, and vaginal infections, and something else tapeworms. It's good for tapeworms, according to the Chinese and Koreans. But then I found a better one. It's based on a word in the Ambonese language. Ambon Island is an island in Indonesia, which came up with this word, apparently. The Ambonese people are ethnically mixed, but have strong cultural identity in a Creole language. A Creole language is what evolves from a pidgin language, which has very simplified grammar and vocabulary, and is used when you have two populations who are suddenly thrown together and have to communicate. So, for example, I would give you English. English started out as a pidgin between the Anglo-Saxon peasants, recently busted down to peasants, and the Norman overlords. So, and from there it became, it developed a more complicated grammar and vocabulary because Creole languages evolve from pidgin languages.
Okay, and somehow there's a word in that language that got picked up as tree of heaven, or
Ambonese is let me see. I think Iolanthus. I don't know. That has something to do with it. So
all right.
I was pretty sure it was yet another word I'm going to have a lot of trouble pronouncing. So
okay, all right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
You
yeah,
betcha.
we're battling tree of heaven on my property, and my son wanted to, try the glyphosate. We're doing it, and they're dying, but. I also have noticed a drop-off in the number of fireflies on our property.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, unfortunately, that glyphosate, turns out it kills insects because what it does is it suppresses melanin production. And insects use melanin kind of like we use white blood cells. The melanin in the insect bloodstream is what engulfs foreign invaders, viruses and bacteria and stuff. And then, then the insect immune system can take care of them and clear them out. But as like Rebecca says, the problems with Tree of Heaven outweigh the benefits of it. So
By quite a bit.
thank you very much. All right, on to ecological news, and our first story. And we're drawing heavily on a story from Canary Media on July 14th, and the title is a cheat sheet to clean energy tax credit changes under Trump's new law. And essentially, the big ugly bill got rid of pretty much everything that encouraged wind and solar. And so if you're somebody who's been considering getting an electric car, for example, do it now, because all the tax credits for getting an electric car, there's $7,500 in tax credits right now, but that will end on September 30th of this year, thanks to Trump and the Republicans. And if you've been considering doing anything like getting rooftop solar or insulating your house or putting in geothermal heating and cooling, you have until December 31st, and then that ends. They also got rid of the tax credits for companies, for corporations that install wind and solar power. Those tax credits get shut off in 1 year, and you have until 4 years to install them all. Of course, they kept all the tax credits for nuclear power and other sorts of really dirty power. Those tax credits remain. They even got rid of there was some tax code. It was a permanent part of the tax code that energy efficiency for corporations, like if a corporation insulated their building or bought more energy efficient equipment, it was a 179D in the tax code, and it was part of the permanent tax code, but they eliminated that. So now corporations are free to have more expensive energy costs that hurt, that cause inflation, basically, because the more they have to spend on like heating and cooling their buildings, the more that's going to pass the cost on to you. And somehow this is supposed to make America great. And of course, what has happened is all the tax credits for polluting industries, such as oil and gas exploration, the Price-Anderson Act that underwrites insurance for nuclear plants, all those subsidies remain. So, that's the situation. So go out today, and order your solar panels, go test drive an electric car, because you got to get that in before September 30th for the cars, or December 31st for the home improvements. Okay, next story. This is in the cool down on July 11th, and it is Pope Leo holds a green mass. And that is that Pope Leo has basically come out in full support of Pope Francis's 2015 encyclical that supports environmental considerations, and basically makes that a moral issue. And in this mass, in his homily, he said that living to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. So in other words, people that don't do that can't be called virtuous. And Pope Leo has a long history of protecting the environment in Peru, and especially as it related to protecting indigenous people in South America, because over there, as is often the case all over the world, the persecution of indigenous people is directly tied to exploiting the environment. The people cut down the forest that the indigenous people are living off of. So he held this mass on the 11th at the Castle Gandolfo, which I got to wonder if Gandalf from Lord of the Rings came from that.
Why do you hear like Italian stuff named Gandolfo, and why is it in Lord of the Rings? What was his thought process there? I want to know.
Well, I don't know, but the Castle Gandolfo is the summer residence for the Pope.
Okay.
And it's this really beautiful outdoor venue, and that's where he held the Mass, actually. And he has also committed the Vatican to things like they have now all electric cars in the Vatican, and the Vatican is going to go 100% solar energy powered, making themselves actually the first state, because the Vatican is a separate state that will be 100% solar powered. So that's nice. Not so nice, going on to this article in the Smithsonian that came out on July 9th. Title, Melting Glaciers Will Lead to More Volcanic Eruptions. Study suggests. Now all eyes are on Antarctica.
Ooh, double plus on good.
Yeah. So we've lost 5% of our glacial ice since 2000, and that loss is accelerating. But what the authors of this study discovered is that when you have glaciers on top of volcanoes, if you melt the glaciers, the volcanoes erupt. Okay, and it's a pretty straightforward, once the glaciers are gone, the volcanoes blow their tops. And the reason is the weight of the volcano, or the weight of the glacier pressing down on the volcano, kind of holds all that magma in place. It's not just sort of the cold. I remember an old Superman comic where he stopped a volcanic eruption by flying a glacier on, and it's not so much the cold as the pressure. And when you relieve the pressure, it's described kind of like if you shake up a pop bottle and take the top off, it just erupts.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And what they're seeing, they look back historically at Iceland from the Ice Age to today, and during the Ice Age, volcanic eruptions were 30 to 50 times less common than after after the glaciers melted, the global glaciers. And this study was done by the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and they also discovered that this is a positive feedback loop. Yes.
Okay.
Because the erupting volcanoes emit tremendous amounts of CO2 and methane. And so the loop here is the glaciers melt. That causes the volcanoes to erupt and put greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Those additional greenhouse gases cause glaciers to melt, et cetera, and then just over and over again. And so yet another example of positive feedback loop. But whenever I see a scientist actually talk about that, I'm heartened, because it was just a few years ago, none of them dared whisper positive feedback loop because the implications are so dire. But now pretty much they're all saying it. Yes, we're caught in one. So, which is one reason some people, like my friend that I was talking with on the trip, have reached despair, because they know that we're in a positive feedback loop. But the hopeful part of that is if you block it, if you stop the input, the positive feedback loop goes away. So, and so a step in
both crossed fingers.
Yes, knock on wood.
Yeah.
So a step in that direction is China has been really kind of going at it in terms of getting off of carbon in a way that sort of embarrasses us. And this past week, they actually announced a new record-setting floating wind turbine. Okay, so that's a turbine that doesn't need to be anchored to the bottom of the sea. It's an offshore turbine, and they have designed, and they're putting out 17 megawatt floating turbines. And this is by the Huning Group, and a 17 megawatt turbine has an area of 587,500 square feet. So the area that the blades go around is equal to 10 football fields. And that's,
wow.
And that's sitting on a turbine that's basically floating.
If football fields were circular.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Line them up and then draw a circle around them.
Okay.
Yeah. But that 17 megawatts, which is just a mind-blowing amount of wind energy, actually pales to the largest wind turbine, which China also came out with earlier this year. This is a regular anchored offshore turbine that uses concrete to just sit on the base of the floor, seafloor. That is a 26 megawatt turbine, and that was created by the Dongfeng Electric Company. That has a swept rotor area of 810,731 square feet, equal to 14 football fields. And the reason it's gotten that big is because every time you extend the blades a little bit, you increase the area a lot, because the area is pi r squared, right? So every time you increase the radius, like if you double the radius, that's not double the area, it's 4 times the area. And if you quintuple the area, that's 25 times the area. So the hub height on this monster, this 26 megawatt turbine, is 600 feet. And it's just it's like we're reaching science fiction levels in terms of these the size that these turbines could get to. And the thing is that potential was always there. We environmentalists have been saying since the 70s, there's more than enough energy in the wind to completely power our civilization. It's just that we were ignored because oil and gas had such and still do have such a hold on our governing systems. And also, we wasted a whole bunch of time. We wasted decades and generations on trying to make nuclear work. And so now on to our next story. Unfortunately, this is also a sad one. Outdoor life on July 18th. And it is essentially grouse extinct in North Dakota. So the greater sage grouse, they went and did their annual survey in North Dakota, and there were 0 males. And what they do is they search for males in what are called leks, L-E-K. And the lek is the area where the grouse do their little performance that, I'm sure you've seen video of it. They do this weird thing with their throat that, like exposes, it looks like they've got eggs in their throat. It make their call. Well, there were 0.
I probably think you're weird too, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not knocking what they need to do. That's their thing. If that's what turns sagebrush or sage grouse on, that's fine. The sage grouse depend on sagebrush for food and shelter and so forth. They were hunting them. Hunting stopped in 2007, but at that point they were already down to a population of 80, and the hunters that year took 21 out of those 80, so they took a quarter of the population. Kind of like they're doing at Yellowstone with the bison now, taking like 40% every year. The main reason given for the loss of habitat is cheatgrass, which is an invasive species that pushes out sagebrush. Wyoming still has a healthy population, but that's because they use herbicides on their grouse habitat in order to keep the cheatgrass from getting a hold. Every year, the U.S. loses 1.3 million acres of sagebrush to invasive species and construction. And part of what happened here is that North Dakota kept trying to get sagebrush listed as endangered species, but the Trump administration in 2017 made the final denial of that, okay, they're about to die out, but they're not endangered yet. And so that's part of what's led us to this situation where they are, in fact, extinct. There's still 9 other states that have greater sage grouse, but North Dakota was one of their main habitats, and they're gone from that state. Okay, final story, and this unfortunately is also a depressing one, but it's important information because the nuclear industry still is pushing this idea that radiation is not harmful. It's natural, it's everywhere. Coldwater Creek, this is the Harvard School of Public Health. On their website, they published a study on July 16th. Living near St. Louis area Coldwater Creek during childhood linked with higher risk of cancer from radiation. And they have Coldwater Creek is a creek that's been contaminated by radioactive wastes left over from the Manhattan Project. And what they did was they just looked at the kids in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They measured where they lived and their rate of exposure by looking at their baby teeth. A lot of baby teeth were saved back then. They had 4,200 people in this study, in this cohort, and they found that if people lived within 1 kilometer of the creek, they had a 44% increased risk of any cancer, a 52% increased risk of solid cancers, that is tumors, and an 85% increased risk of the what they call radio cancers, those that are specially caused by radiation, the thyroid, the breast, and the leukemia. And there was increased risk further out also, but essentially what they discovered, as so many studies have found before, is that the closer they were to the source of radiation, the higher the cancer levels. And so once again, we see very clearly exposure to radiation causes cancer, causes death. And so all these companies and politicians that are pushing nuclear now are basically ignoring the reality that this is going to be hurting people in the future, because all the nuclear plants give off radiation, and all the fuel mining and all the processing and all the waste, all that releases more radiation into the environment, and that there's just no way around it. But this is another excellent study done by Harvard, gold standard science-wise, just something that the nukesters can't just poo-poo, and so that's why I thought I'd bring it up. Well, I think we're just about there for our show. Oh, there was one other thing I learned from my fellow ecological reporters there, is that we have a dead zone now in Lake Erie. Tom Henry on The Blade has done extensive reporting on this. A huge area of Lake Erie in the western basin here is now dead. Everything in it, fish, plants, whatever, are dying because there's no oxygen. Because it's been so hot, it basically cooked out all the oxygen. Hot water can't hold as much air.
Me too, Lake Erie. Me too.
Yeah, sympathy.
I can't hardly breathe myself.
Definite sympathy for Lake Erie there. So, all right, that's it for our show. Get out there and go test drive an electric car. Order your solar panels and get your geothermal heating going, because it's going to get a lot more expensive very quickly. That's it for this show. Thank you so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!